My parents sold my car to pay for my sister's vacation while I covered all their bills, so I moved out and cut them off. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've basically been the financial backbone of my family. It started when I turned 18, that age when most people taste freedom for the first time, but for me, it was the moment I stepped into responsibility I never asked for. My parents always said they were struggling, and maybe in the beginning, I believed them. It felt natural to help with groceries one month, then utilities the next, and eventually every repair, every bill, every emergency. I kept telling myself it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. But 7 years passed, and somehow, their feet never touched the ground. My sister Lily, on the other hand, lived like she floated above reality. She's 20 now, and according to my parents, she's the baby who just needs time to figure herself out. Time, money, comfort, everything she wants lands in her lap without a second thought. I'd come home after a 12-hour shift to see her lounging on the couch, scrolling on her phone, and my mom would smile at her like she hung the moon. Meanwhile, my dad would glance at me with a tired nod, as if my exhaustion was simply part of the house scenery. Working 2 jobs became my normal, mornings in a warehouse, nights at a delivery gig. I convinced myself it was worth it because family loyalty mattered. Because that's what good sons do. Because helping them made me feel needed, even if it drained me. But the cracks started showing when my parents brushed off my obvious exhaustion. I once came home barely able to stand, and all my mom said was, "Lily tried her best today. She cleaned her room." I remember just staring, wondering how my best never earned praise. Still, I swallowed it. Told myself I was overreacting, that it was fine. But deep down, a small ache grew every time they looked past me. An ache I didn't yet realize would soon become impossible to ignore. I used to think I was imagining things, the way my parents had slowly begun monitoring my spending like they were the ones earning my paychecks. It started small, my mom asking how much I made on a shift, my dad casually checking my bank notifications when my phone lit up on the table. I brushed it off as concern, but over time, their questions got sharper, more entitled. One morning at breakfast, my dad said, "You don't need to buy unnecessary things right now. Focus on helping the family." The thing he was referring to? A pair of cheap work boots I'd needed for months. Lily, of course, took this as her personal cue to escalate things. She'd throw comments like, "Must be nice having money to waste," whenever I bought something for myself. I'd laugh it off, but there was a sting beneath every word. The irony was she hadn't held a job longer than 3 weeks. She quit her last one because the manager was rude, which meant he asked her to show up on time. Still, I tried to keep the peace. I told myself they were stressed, that maybe I wasn't being patient enough. So when I finally saved up enough for a used car, nothing fancy, just reliable, I felt like I'd earned a little piece of freedom. It meant no more waiting for buses in the cold, no more walking home after midnight shifts. It felt like the first real step toward independence. But the moment I told my parents I planned to buy it, the air shifted. They exchanged a look, one I'd seen before but never understood. "Why do you need a car right now?" my mom asked, her voice tight. "You're always working anyway." It didn't make sense. Instead of being happy for me, they looked uneasy. Even Lily chimed in, rolling her eyes as she said, "You act like you're rich or something." I shrugged off the discomfort because I wanted that moment of joy so badly. But even then, somewhere deep in my gut, something whispered, "They don't want you to have freedom. Not even a little." Buying that car felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I didn't know I'd lost. It wasn't new or shiny, the paint was a little faded, and the engine hummed louder than it should, but it was mine. When I sat in the driver's seat for the first time, the worn fabric smell and the faint rattling under the dashboard felt like freedom. I remember gripping the steering wheel and thinking, maybe things will finally get easier. I didn't realize then how temporary that feeling would be. When I drove it home, my parents barely looked up. My dad muttered, "At least it runs," while Lily smirked and said, "Couldn't you have gotten something nicer?" As if I'd bought it to impress her. I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself I didn't need their approval. But small things started happening almost immediately. One afternoon, I overheard Lily complaining to my mom. "He's spending money on stupid things instead of helping me. How am I supposed to go on vacation like this?" Her voice was loud, sharp, dripping with entitlement. My mom's response was quiet but chilling. "We'll figure something out, sweetheart." That sentence stuck with me longer than I wanted to admit. A few days later, I started noticing Lily going through my room. Drawers slightly open, documents shifted, my pay stubs no longer where I left them. When I confronted her, she just shrugged and said, I needed something, without even looking at me. My parents brushed it off, saying I was overreacting. That was when I started locking my desk drawer, something I'd never felt the need to do before. It felt wrong, locking things away in my own home. But something about Lily's expression that day had unsettled me. Like she already knew more about my finances than she should. I tried to push the paranoia aside, tried to enjoy having a car, even if it meant waking up early to warm it up or fixing little quirks myself. But every time I turned the key, I felt a strange unease building. And part of me, since the car had become more than just transportation, it had become a threat to someone in this house. It started with Lily barging into my room one evening, her voice already loud before I even turned around. I'm going on a beach vacation with my friends, she announced like it was breaking news. It'll cost around $1,400. You can cover it, right? She said it casually, like asking me to grab milk from the store, not like she was demanding more than half my monthly income. I blinked at her, waiting for the punchline, but her arms were crossed, and she was dead serious. I'm not paying for that, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I can barely keep up with bills as it is. She scoffed, like I was the unreasonable one. You have 2 jobs, she replied sharply. You don't have kids or responsibilities. What do you even need money for? Her words stung more than I expected. I'd spent years killing myself to make sure they never had to choose between rent and heat, and somehow, that turned into I didn't deserve my own money. When she stormed downstairs complaining, I could hear her feeding the story to my parents. My mom called me down a few minutes later, her voice heavy with disappointment. Lily works so hard, she began, ignoring the fact that her last job lasted only 19 days. She deserves a break. Can't you help her just this once? I stood there, exhausted from a 10-hour shift, and felt something inside me twist. I said no. I repeated quietly. My dad sighed like I was the burden. You should step up. You're the eldest. That line hit harder than I expected. Step up? I'd been stepping up since I was old enough to sign my name on a paycheck. I told them firmly that I wasn't paying for a vacation, and Lily's angry footsteps above us told me the conversation wasn't over. As I walked back to my room, I caught her door slam hard enough to shake the hallway. And with that slam, something in this house shifted. Something sharp, something dangerous, like a warning I didn't yet know how to read. The days after that fight were painfully quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't bring peace, but pressure. Lily stopped speaking to me entirely. She walked around the house like I didn't exist, brushing past me in hallways with exaggerated sighs, or muttering something under her breath just loud enough to sting. My parents weren't much better. They didn't yell or confront me, but the shift in their behavior was obvious. Every request suddenly had an edge. Every conversation felt like a test I was failing. My mom would say things like, "It must be nice to only think about yourself," while stirring a pot of soup I paid for. My dad asked at least 3 times a week if I planned on contributing more this month, even though I'd already covered most of the bills. It was like the entire house had collectively decided I was the villain in their story. And Lily, she became sneaky. I'd hear her door open late at night, followed by footsteps lingering near mine. Twice I walked into the kitchen and caught her closing a drawer that definitely hadn't been opened before. Once, she was in the laundry room holding my work jacket. When she saw me, she just rolled her eyes and said, "Relax." I wasn't doing anything. But the worst moment happened when I went to grab my car keys from the hook by the door, and they weren't there. I searched the whole house, retracing my steps until my stomach churned. I eventually found them tossed behind the couch, as if someone had deliberately hidden them. When I confronted my parents, they shrugged and suggested I was being forgetful. Lily giggled from the stairs like it was a private joke. I tried to shake it off. I told myself stress was making me paranoid, that maybe I had misplaced them, even though I never had before. I convinced myself everything would smooth out eventually. But deep down, a tightening fear grew in my chest, a fear that something was building, slowly and quietly. And I had no idea how close I was to losing everything. The day everything snapped started out completely normal. I left early for my morning shift, half asleep, half anxious, hoping the tension at home would eventually dissolve on its own. Work was brutal, pallets collapsing, supervisors yelling, my hands aching from the cold warehouse air. By the time my shift ended, all I wanted was to sit in my car, breathe, and let my brain shut off for a moment. But when I stepped out into the parking lot, something felt off. My stomach dropped before my brain even processed why. My car wasn't there. At first, I froze. I looked around, thinking maybe I parked farther away than usual. I walked the entire lot twice, my breathing getting faster and sharper. That buzzing panic in my chest turned into a sick, heavy dread. I called my parents immediately. Did someone pick up my car? Is something wrong? I asked, voice shaking. My dad answered like he'd been waiting for the call. Relax, he said casually. We handled it. Handled what? I whispered, pacing between parking spaces. The wind felt colder suddenly. My hands wouldn't stay still. He sighed like I was the one overreacting. We sold it. For a moment, everything went silent, like the world stopped moving just long enough for the words to slam into me. You what? I finally choked out. My mom grabbed the phone and jumped in. Don't make this dramatic. Lily needed money for her trip. You can get another car. I swear I felt something inside me break. When I got home, Lily was in the living room, scrolling through her phone with a grin. Look, she said, shoving her screen toward me. Plane tickets. Hotel reservations. All bought with the money from my car. Isn't it exciting? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. My pulse roared in my ears. They'd sold the only thing that gave me independence. The thing I worked months to afford. The thing that made survival possible. And as I stood there trying to breathe, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was betrayal. Deep, calculated betrayal. And it was only the beginning. I don't think I've ever felt anger the way I felt it that day. Not loud, not explosive, but this cold, shaking disbelief that sat heavy in my chest. I asked them how they could possibly sell something that didn't belong to them. My voice cracked, not because I was yelling, but because I was trying not to. My dad leaned back on the couch like I was inconveniencing him by existing. You live in our house, he said. Everything here belongs to the family. The way he said family felt less like unity and more like a threat. That car was legally mine, I said, my hands trembling. I paid for it. I insured it. You had no right. My mom rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. You're overreacting. We needed money for your sister's opportunity. Why are you being selfish? Her words hit me like a slap. Selfish? After everything I'd paid for? Every bill, every emergency, every month I went without so they didn't have to? Lily chimed in from the doorway, arms crossed and smug. You should be grateful. Your car finally helped someone. I turned to her, disbelief twisting into something darker. I needed that car to get to work, I said quietly. You knew that? She shrugged. Not my problem. Something in the room shifted. Suddenly, my parents weren't just defending themselves. They were rewriting history right in front of me. My mom said, we never asked you to pay for everything. You chose to. My dad nodded. You like acting like a martyr. Nobody told you to take on so much. For a second, I actually questioned myself. That's the worst part. They had me doubting my own memory, my own reality. Then it clicked. This wasn't new. They had been twisting narratives for years, shrinking my contributions and inflating Lily's excuses. I looked at their faces, all three of them, and it hit me like ice water. They didn't see me as a son. They saw me as a wallet, a workhorse, a resource. And now that I was finally pushing back, they were willing to break me to keep control. My hands were still trembling when I realized something even worse. If they could sell my car, what else were they capable of? The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache from barely sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty parking space. The car that had taken months of double shifts to afford, gone, just like that. I knew I had to do something, even if it was desperate. So I went to the police station before work, clutching the folder with my purchase documents, insurance papers, everything. My hands shook the entire drive there. I had borrowed a coworker's car just to get across town. When I explained what happened, the officer looked sympathetic, but only for a second. Do you live with them? He asked. I nodded. Did you store the car at their residence? I nodded again. He exhaled slowly, like he'd done this 1,000 times. This is a civil issue, not criminal. We can't intervene. You'll need to take it to small claims court. My stomach sank. But they stole my property. They sold it without my permission. He shook his head. I get it. But with shared residence and family ties, it gets complicated. You'll need a lawyer. A lawyer I definitely couldn't afford. I walked out of that station feeling like the ground had disappeared under me. At work, I tried holding it together, but halfway through my shift, everything crashed at once. I dropped a box, the sound echoing through the warehouse, and suddenly my chest tightened. My vision blurred. I crouched down between the aisles because I couldn't breathe. A coworker found me like that, shaking, trying not to break completely. He helped me to the break room, and all I could say was, "They took everything." As if things weren't bad enough, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Rent is due tomorrow. If you don't pay, don't bother coming home." A second message followed. "And don't be late this time." I stared at the screen, feeling physically sick. They'd taken my money, my time, my car, and now they were threatening the only shelter I had left. For the first time in years, I felt completely alone. No car, no savings, no support, no escape. And in that moment, hunched over in a break room, barely holding myself together, I realized I had finally hit rock bottom, and they were still digging. After that breakdown at work, something inside me shifted. Not strength, not anger, just a quiet clarity. If I stayed in that house, they would destroy whatever was left of me. So that night, instead of going home right away, I sat in my coworker's car outside a cheap fast food place and started scrolling through room-for-rent listings. Everything felt impossible. The prices, the deposits, the logistics, but staying wasn't an option anymore. I had nothing left to lose. When I finally walked through the front door at home, I didn't say a word. I just nodded at my parents, went to my room, and shut the door. They didn't ask where I'd been. They didn't care. The first step was figuring out what I still had. I opened my drawer and stared at the scattered documents Lily had rummaged through. I gathered them carefully, birth certificate, pay stubs, bank statements, and placed them in a folder I hid in my backpack. I started documenting everything, saved receipts, screenshotting bank transfers, even recording myself walking through the house, describing what bills I'd covered. It felt paranoid, but I wasn't taking chances anymore. My coworker, the same one who found me breaking down, offered me something I never expected. "If you need a place to crash for a bit, my spare room's empty." I almost cried, not out of sadness, but because it was the first genuine kindness I'd felt in months. I told him I needed a week to get my things together. He nodded and said, "Take your time. Just don't tell them." And that last part echoed in my mind constantly, "Don't tell them." So I didn't. I moved with silence and precision. Every night, I'd take 1 or 2 personal items, a few shirts stuffed into my backpack, chargers, my headphones, and drop them off in my coworker's car during lunch the next day. Piece by piece, my life relocated without anyone knowing. But Lily was watching me more closely now. She'd stand in the hallway pretending to scroll her phone whenever I left my room. Once, she asked, "Why are you packing bags?" in that suspicious tone of hers. I forced a laugh and lied, "Laundry." She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. And that's when I knew. If I wasn't careful, they'd try to take whatever little I had left before I escaped. The night I chose to leave wasn't dramatic at first. No yelling, no threats, just a quiet resolve settling in my chest as I folded the last of my clothes into my backpack. My heart was pounding, not from fear of leaving, but from fear of what they would do once they realized I was actually serious. I walked out of my room, backpack slung over one shoulder, and found my parents sitting in the living room. The TV glow flickered across their faces. Lily was on the couch, scrolling her phone with that same smug entitlement she always carried. I stood there for a moment, gathering the courage to speak. "I'm moving out," I said finally. My voice was steady, but my hands were trembling. That silence, the sharp, heavy kind, settled over the room before everything exploded. My mom shot up first. "What do you mean you're moving out?" she snapped. "Where will you go? Who's going to pay the bills?" My dad's voice followed, louder. "You can't just abandon your family because you're angry about a car. Don't be childish." Lily looked up at me with pure annoyance. "Are you serious right now? You're leaving over this? You're unbelievable." I almost laughed at the irony. They'd taken thousands from me, sold my car, manipulated me for years, and somehow I was the unreasonable one. I took a deep breath and pulled out the folder I'd been preparing. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every bill I'd paid, all neatly documented. I placed it on the coffee table. "These are all the expenses I've covered for the last 7 years," I said quietly. "Thousands of dollars. Groceries, utilities, repairs, rent. You told the police you never asked me to pay?" Here's proof. Their expressions flickered, guilt, panic, anger, all tangled together. My mom lunged forward. You can't leave. We need you. That was the first time she'd ever admitted it out loud. Lily stood up and shoved her phone at me. Fine. Pay for my vacation before you go, then do whatever you want. I stared at her, stunned. I'm not paying you anything, I said. Not anymore. My dad's voice dropped into a growl. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. I gripped my backpack straps harder. Okay, I said. And I walked out, their shouts echoing behind me, growing more desperate and angry with every step, until the door finally slammed shut. The first night in my coworker's spare room felt unreal. The mattress was thin, the room was small, and the window didn't close all the way, but it was the first place in years where I didn't feel watched, judged, or drained. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of distant traffic instead of Lily's stomping or my parents arguing. For the first time, the silence felt like peace, not pressure. I didn't realize how tightly I'd been holding myself together until my entire body finally relaxed. No one knocking on my door. No guilt. No demands. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages. At first, I didn't open them, but curiosity got the better of me. The group chat with my parents and Lily was chaos. Mom, when are you sending the money? Dad, electricity bill is due today. Lily, you better not screw up my vacation. I stared at those messages with a mix of disbelief and something close to heartbreak. I had left less than 12 hours ago, and not one of them had asked if I was okay. Not one even acknowledged the years I'd held that house together. Over the next few days, the tone shifted. Mom, the water got shut off. Are you happy? Dad, we can't cover groceries. You need to come back. Lily, you ruined everything. My trip is falling apart. Their world was collapsing without me, and they finally realized it. But I didn't answer. Instead, I focused on my new routine, waking up early, making coffee in a quiet kitchen, talking with my coworker about job opportunities closer to his neighborhood. I even applied for a better-paying position he recommended. Every small step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they had chipped away for years. By the end of the week, the messages turned into full-blown desperation. Mom, please, we're begging you. We need help. Dad, we can talk. Just come home. Lily, you're doing this on purpose. You're evil. I set the phone down and realized something important. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they were drowning without my labor. And for once, that wasn't my problem. Still, I knew things weren't done. There was one final confrontation on the horizon. 2 months passed, and my life slowly began to feel mine. I'd gotten the new job, better pay, better hours, better people. I'd saved up enough for a small used car, nothing fancy, but reliable. When I sat in that driver's seat, feeling the smooth hum of an engine I owned, it felt like closure. Like taking back every stolen hour, every manipulated dollar, every piece of freedom they'd chipped away. I parked it outside my new apartment, a tiny studio with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, and I still felt richer than I ever had in my parents' house. But just when I thought they'd finally left me alone, they showed up at my workplace. I was on my lunch break when I heard someone calling my name. I turned and saw them, my mom, my dad, and Lily, standing in the parking lot. Lily's hair was a mess, her eyes puffy like she'd been crying. My mom looked panicked, wringing her hands. My dad had that familiar stern expression he used whenever he wanted control. I felt my stomach tighten, but not with fear, with disbelief that they'd actually tracked me down. We need to talk, my dad said firmly, stepping forward. My mom chimed in, tears hovering. We're struggling. We need your help, just until we're back on our feet. And then Lily, who hadn't messaged me in weeks, snapped. You ruined my life. You OWE me. That was it. That was the moment I realized they hadn't changed at all. I stayed calm, quiet, steady. I'm not responsible for you anymore, I said. And there are consequences for what you did. My dad barked. Consequences for what? I reached into my backpack and pulled out a neatly organized folder, the same one I'd shown them the night I left, but updated. Selling my car was illegal, I said. I filed a civil claim. You'll be hearing from the court. Their faces drained of color. My mom stammered. Lily's jaw dropped. My dad took a step back, muttering something under his breath. I didn't wait for them to respond. I turned, walked back inside, and closed the door behind me with a clarity I'd never felt before. Later that night, I blocked their numbers. All of them. And for the first time in 7 years, I slept without dread. It wasn't revenge that made me feel whole. It was freedom. And finally, the life I was rebuilding was one they would never be allowed to touch again.